Hi everyone. These new features I'm about to show off were funded by myindie.com. They hired me to create these tools, and they were gracious enough to allow me to share them with the rest of the Moho community. So there's a lot of tools I need to show off, and so let's get started. Let's see. The first tool I want to show you guys is a tool that's called the cloner. It's a clone offsetter. How this tool basically works is if you have a layer, like the one I have now, and you create another layer, let's suppose you duplicate and you move it up some distance like this. What you can do is you can choose the first layer and then hold shift and choose the next layer. And when you you press this little button here for the cloner, what it'll do is it'll create duplicates that'll be perfectly offset by whatever the change you made between the two layers. So basically the code will analyze the differences between the two layers, and then it'll just keep iterating more and more clones. So if I just press this right here, you will see they're nice and perfectly offset as I make new clones. This also works with not just transformations. It also works with rotations and scale. So if I choose something like maybe a star, this, maybe I go ahead and give it a fill, like that. I can go ahead and duplicate it, grab that star, move it over a little bit, maybe rotate it just a little bit, and maybe scale it up. Oops, scale it up just a little bit like that. Let me pull it like that. Now if I choose the previous layer and then choose the next one, that tells you the direction I want to go. Whichever direction you want to go. If I want to go backwards, I would choose this one first, then the next one, and it would start iterating to the left. If I choose the farthest one to the left, then the one to the right, it'll start iterating to the right. So if I choose it this way, and I choose the little clone offset, you will see it rotates it and it scales it as it goes, which can be pretty neat, pretty useful stuff. Go ahead and delete those. Another interesting thing about this is if you come over here and you create another layer, and you do something like, let's say, create a curve, like so, I can take this initial layer here, I can choose to have it follow the curve, maybe like, oops, let's go ahead and reposition it like that. Now I can have it follow this curve like this, and maybe I'll give it a little bit of a rotation if I wanted. And then what I could do is make a duplicate, move that duplicate a little bit further down like that. And as some of you may have guessed, when you select and you start duplicating, it'll duplicate, and each duplicate will follow the curve. And just like before, you can apply rotation, you can apply scale and all that kind of stuff. Another interesting thing is once you go past the farthest point, it'll actually move everything and rescale everything so everything stays nice and even with each other. So if I keep going, you see it it moves everything so that it all stays nice and scaled. Some of the interesting things, that can be done with this. Let me show you a good example. You do something like maybe a circle. Like that. And maybe I'll turn off the stroke. Then I'll make another layer. I could make this layer into something like an arrow. And then I could have that arrow point like this way. I could then take that arrow, put it on the curve, double click on it, and if you wanted to follow the curve, just choose to rotate to follow path, like that. And then of course you could do something like, duplicate it, put this one however distance you want further down, and then I could do something like maybe scale it in just a little bit, like that, and then choose the previous, and then this one, and then just start going around the curve. And it'll actually start to flip all the way around as it goes around. So you can do a lot of really neat things with this. And just like before, once you start getting to the end, it'll start adjusting everything around so that you can easily add. You can create all kinds of fractals and all kinds of neat looking cool stuff like this. So that's what that tool does. I'm sure you guys are going to have a blast with that. The next tool I want to show you is some changes I made to the fade in and fade out. So if I come over here and I choose a new vector layer, and if I create, let's suppose, a little square like this, give it some fill. If I want to fade in, what I would do is I now have a simple button right here for fading in and fading out. All you have to do is just press that button, and from wherever you are, it'll set the very first keyframe, or the keyframe that came immediately before. It'll make sure that that's keyframed in and it's off. So if I come over here and I press this like this, it found the most farthest keyframe away is this one right here. So it made sure to turn the very next keyframe off so that you can fade in. And then it went out some distance and then gave another keyframe for you to slowly do the fade in from. And of course it works with the fade out as well. So the fade out right here button has a button now. So now doing fade in and fade out is as easy as using a button. And this all works really well together. So if I go out this way and of course I use fade in again, you'll see it very nicely and very cleanly applies the fade in as well. So you can easily do this. The default right now, the distances that it's set is to 10 keyframes, but that can be altered. There's also a button right here for settings. So if you want to click on this, you can choose the settings for the default fade in and fade out. So if you want to make it like maybe to 5 for fade in offset, maybe 5 for the other one, or 6 or whatever, you can do that, and then it'll change how the fade in and fade out works. So that's the basics of the fade in and fade out tools. Now another tool that I think a lot of you guys will probably be rather interested in is the rounded edge tool. How this one works is very simple. You simply choose a straight edge. This works for straight edges. I should point that out very immediately, basically, which is to say that you want to make sure they're sharp corners. So corners like this will work, real sharp corners. You don't want to use this tool on Bezier points because it's not really meant to be used on that. But if you want to do something like if you have a square or you have some kind of other sharp corners and you want to round them out like you would in Illustrator or another program, this will handle that. So simply select a point, choose the round corner tool right here, you click it. You will see you have different options. You have an inverted option, a straight option, a circular option, and a rounded option, which gives you little choices for how rounded you want it to be. If I choose the perfect circle right here, it'll basically, when I click and round it out, you see, it rounds it out like a circle. And of course I could do the inverted one, and now it inverts as a circle. Or I could choose straight, and it does the straight edge. Or of course I could set some kind of rounding amount that I want, some custom. I want to be less rounded, even less rounded, or maybe more rounded. I can play with this, decide how I want it. This works for all points. If you choose all points, it'll work for all of them. So if I go ahead and select all the points like this and choose that same tool, I could choose something like inverted and then click and then invert all of them like so. I could do something like take a star, maybe like this, and maybe I could choose the, let me select it, turn on the fill. Maybe I could choose the outer points right here, and then make those circular like so. And then I could choose the inner points and then perhaps make those straight. So you can make all kinds of really neat features like that. Of course, a lot of people just want to, take triangles, like for example. And I know a lot of people have situations where it's a real pain rounding them out. But now, making rounded triangles, it's very easy. And obviously making squares and rectangles and so on, maybe you want to have a special shape where this part here is rounded and that part right there maybe has an inverted proportion to it. Whatever it is you want to do, the rounded tool will take care of that. Okay. So let's see. We have several other tools to go over. Let's see. We need to go over the custom keyframe tool as well. I'll get to that one in a sec. Right now I'll get over the match height and match width tools. What those do is very simple. If you have a shape, let me show you using autofill. If you have some kind of shape like this, and let's suppose you have another shape right here, and this shape is much smaller. Suppose it's maybe that big. You may have situations where you want this shape to be shrunk down, or maybe you have a whole bunch of them and you want them all to be shrunk down so that they're about the same height. Like if this is text or something like that, you may have a situation where you need these to match the height, or you need these to match the width of another shape. And that can be a little bit tedious to do. All you have to do now is simply choose that shape, that layer, hold shift, choose the layer you want it to match to, and you have these two tools here. This one right here will match it to the height. So if I click that, see this one right here now matches that one's height. Or it can match the width. And if I click this, it will shrink this one until this one right here is at the same width. See? So that makes matching different sizes to heights and widths and so on a lot easier, which is really nice for lining things up whenever you need to mess with text and things like that. Let's see, another tool that we need to go over is, I've got the load layer data and the save layer data tools. What those do is simply, if you have a layer, and let's suppose you did a bunch of stuff to it, like you scaled it and you rotated it and maybe did some kind of whatever transformations you may have done to it, whatever type of stuff. It also works with opacities, so maybe you turn the opacity a little bit down and you have all the stuff done to it, and then you have, let's suppose, another layer, and you want to be able to very quickly and rapidly apply everything you did to this particular layer right here. You want to be able to apply everything you did to this green one to this red one. What you would do is you would simply choose the green one. You would choose the save layer data, and it'll save all that layer data. Then you would go to the red one and you would simply choose to load the layer data. If you do that, the red one, you just see, now has the same layer data as the green one. So even the opacities have been set to be the same, and all kinds of other stuff. It's all the same. So that's a nice little time saver. And now the custom keyframe tool. This one's a little bit more complicated, but this is how it works. If you want to use Bezier curves, you can come down here. Let's suppose I take this layer right here and I give it a fill, and I move it over here to the left, and I put its position down, and I come out here some distance, and I go out like that. If I wanted to, I could choose this first keyframe right here, right click, and I could set it to a Bezier curve, like so. Then what I can do is go to the motion graph, click here, and now I can really play with how I want the interpolations to work. Like maybe I want to pull this one out and create my own kind of ease out. However, how I think ease out should work, I could create my own, kind of like that. And what you could do is, once you've got your Bezier curve like exactly how you want it to work, you can come over to the channels area, and what you can do is you can choose this particular keyframe right here. And if you go over to the create custom keyframes, if you click on that, you can choose a name for that keyframe. Like I can choose the name of like ease in or ease out or whatever it is I want to call it, and then you would just hit OK. And what that'll do, let me pop this open a second to show you, is in your custom contents folder, you need to make sure you have a custom contents folder set up with Moho. And in your custom contents folder, within the utilities area, if you click on that, it'll create this text file right here where it says dr text frames. And within that text file, I have a bunch of information about the name you chose, whatever name you chose to name your little custom keyframe. It'll name it that, and it'll store all the information about that Bezier curve there. So once all that data is saved, you can come over here, and I already have several of these already saved. And once they're already saved, you can simply choose the load one right here, the custom keyframes. Click it, and it'll have a little drop down menu, and it'll show all those keyframes that you named and you saved. Like I have one here called ease out. Click it, hit OK. You will see that this one has now been set to the little ease out that I custom created using Bezier curves. And of course, if I can change it again, like this is the ease out, I could click it again, maybe choose ease in, hit OK. Now you see, now it's showing the ease in one. And if I go to the graph, you can see it has those Bezier, all that Bezier data saved, and it's just reloading it in. And you can make as many as you need. It'll keep saving these text files. Choose a different one. Let's suppose I call this one, there's the center one I have saved. Hit OK. And you can see now it kind of slows down at the center and speeds out. So yeah, this should be useful to a lot of people who use Bezier curves a lot and maybe get tired of having to constantly recreate a certain movement that you like a lot. You can just save it now and then just recall it whenever you need it. So that's not all the scripts yet, because I've still got one last left. So let me go ahead and show you how this last script works. A lot of times there's situations where you're working with a switch layer, and let's suppose you have a layer like this, and we have another one like that, another one like that, and like that. And it's going to be things like, you know, mouth shapes or eyes or all kinds of things that you may have. You may have a lot of layers, and those layers exist within a switch layer. So if I make this into a switch, you have a situation where from time to time you have a lot of stuff inside of a switch layer and you want to be able to see it all at once. This is something I find a lot of people complain about. You want to be able to see everything in the switch layer at once, and then when you're done, just kind of like have everything go back to being how it normally was. We now have a button that does this. If you have the switch layer selected, like this right here, if you'll see this new icon right here called switch view, if you click that, what'll happen is it'll create this group within your switch called packed group, and it has all of your layers. It just moved all of your layers inside of it, so you can see all of your layers, you can interact with them, and it makes it green so you can easily reach it through the filter. You can see what you need to mess with. And of course, when you're done, just choose the switch layer again, and then just press that same button again, and it'll unpack everything back, and everything goes back to how it originally was. All of your data is still saved inside of your switch layer. Everything's just fine, and you can do this as often as you need to. See, it's So now you can see everything you need to see. When you're done, repack it. So I believe that is pretty much all I really wanted to show everyone. And again, these scripts were funded by the people at mynd.com. So if you want to thank them for that, that was very generous of them to allow me to share this with you guys. So thanks for watching.